This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, Season 2, Episode 67. And what's more important to us, the CNC router crowd, it can write G-code. I kid you not, computer program that writes its own G-code. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs. I'm so glad that you could listen in on today's episode because I got to tell you, it's great to be back in the flow and doing these episodes again and putting out the information that you want to hear about in the CNC router world. Many of you realize that this experience of having a CNC router table and using it to make things is life-changing. It can really elevate the way you feel about creating things, and it can change lives. It can give you new focus. It can give you something to direct your passions towards as far as your creativity, your ingenuity. It can help you to experience some of the entrepreneurial spirit. It can give you a really great feeling of satisfaction as you make things for your family and loved ones. So this can be a game changer, and I really am so happy that I got involved in CNC routers. Now, if you'd like to meet and interact with other folks who are into CNC router tables, they own one, they're thinking of buying one, or they own several, or whatever that stage is, one great place for you to do that is inside the hashtag CNC Router Tips group on Facebook. Now, I will put a link in the show notes where you can join that. It's a free membership to join that, and we'd really like to see you come in and share in the knowledge with everybody. And it's really a great group. There's about 20,000 people in it so far, and I think you'd fit right in. So things are changing pretty rapidly in the CNC router world. There are so many new and exciting things that we can do with these machines because of not only hardware changes, but software changes. Just a few years ago, thinking that you were able to have a machine that would know where the router bit was at all times was, just kind of wishful thinking because, stepper motors, they just move as many, or they exactly try to move as far as the software tells them to, but there's no guarantee that the bit will ever get to where it's supposed to go because there's no feedback in the system. So there was, nothing on the average stepper motor that could tell it where it was. And now we've got digital stepper motors with, built-in closed-loop feedback that will, allow the bit to move, and then it checks to see if it actually moved that far. And it will throw an error and tell you, if it got it wrong. We've also got things like the servo motors that are out there, and their prices really dropped down so that, they're now an affordable option for the hobby machinist. And we've even got things like the ClearPath servo, which is kind of a combination of both a stepper motor and a servo motor, but more towards the servo end of things. But it's all self-contained in one package. So, you don't have to have a separate stepper driver because it's built onto the end of the motor. And that's the same thing with some of the closed loop stepper motors as well. But it's really getting to the point now where we can have some fascinating, fast machines that are very accurate and able to do some really high precision stuff. But you would think it would end there, but it didn't. Because while the hardware has been advancing, so has the software. There are new programs out there that are doing some phenomenal things. Unless you've been under a rock or just not paying attention to anything in social media, everybody is now talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Now, there is thankfully a whole bunch of programs now that will do things for you that are controlled by a computer program that is artificially intelligent. Now, that means to the average person, you really have a difficult time believing that this is not a human or, somebody doing these things. But the one that everybody's talking about right now is ChatGPT, which is an OpenAI program that currently has a free version and there's a paid version that is just coming out as we speak. But ChatGPT is just one of many that is based on a platform called OpenAI, which was developed by some, pretty forward-thinking people and investors of all kinds. There's all sorts of names that I'm not going to get into right now that are behind that project. But what they did was they put out a basic AI engine that people could write interfaces for and set up a use case that they wanted to solve for and create programs and release them out into the world that people could use. So why am I talking about an artificial intelligence program that is designed to write and speak like a human? Well, here's the thing. ChatGPT can also code. And by that, I mean it can do basic programming in Java, C, C++, all sorts of things. And what's more important to us, the CNC router crowd, it can write G code. I kid you not. Computer program that writes its own G code. If you can be descriptive enough about what you want it to do and where you want it to go, it will create the G code for you. And I'll post an example of some of the code that it generated for me the first time I tried it. I'll put that in the show notes as well. But that's the whole point of this thing is it will generate the G code that you could then take into a program like Mach 3 or Mach 4 or UCCNC or any of the other programs that interpret G code and push out commands to our stepper motors and servo motors to move the gantries. It can do that. Now, is the code that is created safe to use on your machine? I don't know, because I haven't had the the guts to take their software that they generate, that G code, put it on my machine and run it, because I don't want to break anything. But I'll be honest with you, I have gone through a couple of my simulation programs that will take G code and simulate what should happen if you ran that program. And things look pretty good. So, what kind of program am I talking about? Well, if you have Mach 4, for instance, Mach 4 is one of the softwares that the people who make Mach 3 came out with. Mach 4 is just a version for more modern computers. Mach 4 has a plugin that was, recently released, which will simulate a 3D toolpath based on the G code that it gets. So it's called 3D Cutting Simulator, and it's a Module Works plugin for Mach 4 Hobby. They're currently only have this available in the hobby version. If you've got Mach 4 Industrial, they're working on a port to it, but there's I don't imagine that they want to release that until they can do some collision detection and avoidance things that they're just not doing yet. But these things will continue to develop as they go along, and it's something you could try and there will be a link to that software in the show notes. But if you go to mocksupport.com, which is the website for Mach 3, it's listed there, and you can check that out. It's under software, and you'll see a simulator link there. So what does this mean currently to, those of us who are making CNC programs and who are doing new and exciting things? Well, it probably doesn't mean a whole lot if you're the guy who's going to be programming the G code at a machine or in a facility, because I believe it will be quite a while before industry trusts the AI enough to, risk multi-$100,000 machines in the, running code that's untested and with no human input. But what is interesting about the ChatGPT program and other artificial intelligence programs is it takes all the questions that it was asked, the inputs and the outputs, and it learns machine learning from that. And it gets better over time as it gets feedback, because you can ask a question of it or, specify what you want it to do. And then if it's not right, you can give it another instruction and it will remember the instruction that it was given previously and modify its results to match the additional information that you asked for. So it's really quite amazing to think about this. We're really at an interesting time technology wise, where we've got easy to use technology and inexpensive technology coming to the forefront. Because a few years ago when I started, back in the first part of this century, you couldn't buy a CNC router table for under $1,000. And now they're routinely available on places like eBay and Amazon. The quality is not as good as some of the more expensive machines that you would buy. But the point is, anybody who decides that they want one can probably afford one some way. They are not, the price is no longer the barrier that it was to get started. When I got started, you were looking at, the least expensive machine that I ever saw at that time was the ShopBot. They were going for $8,000 or $10,000 at the time, for a stripped down machine. Now they're in the 30s and 40s. So, you start thinking about what the availability of low cost equipment is doing. And now you add the ability to add in free or low cost software, and things get really exciting. And, there's a lot of crossover in technology from things like the 3D printer world into the CNC router world, because, those guys are constantly innovating, doing their additive manufacturing. And some of the things that they're doing in additive manufacturing can be applied to subtractive manufacturing, which is what we do with the CNC router. Now, before I go off and assume everybody knows what the heck I'm talking about, additive manufacturing is when you lay down a layer after layer after layer of material to build up what it is that you wanted to create with your CNC machine. That's typically what's done with a 3D printer. And almost everybody has seen a picture of this little nozzle running around, squirting out plastic and making, building up pretty complex parts. Well, subtractive manufacturing is taking a cutting tool, in most cases a router bit, which is a spinning bit that just shaves off a little piece at a time of material until it shaves away everything that we don't want, and what's left is what we do want. It's kind of like a sculptor taking a block of marble and a chisel and hammering away until he releases the statue of David from inside of the block. That's what we're doing with CNC routers. That's subtractive manufacturing versus additive. Now, so far with the AI G-code generation that I was doing with ChatGPT, I haven't done anything really complicated. It's mostly like, instructing it to, using a 1/4-inch bit, to create a square, 3 inches wide by, 1/2 inch deep. It can do that all day long. And then I can tell it to drill, holes at specific XY points on that. And it will do that. And if I ask for circular interpolation, it actually knows what that is and can do that. So it's kind of interesting to do that, but to create things that way. But most people have difficulty using English to describe a 3-dimensional object. I know I certainly did. But what is cool about it, it's something that I hadn't really thought of until it hit me.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
But what is cool about it, it's something that I hadn't really thought of until it hit me. I could take the G code that I wrote or that was created for me in my Vectrix software or in my Fusion 360 program. I could take that G code and I could load it in to the AI and have it read it. And then I could give it a prompt or a command to tell it to make verbose comments for each line of the G code to tell me what it did. Or even just say, make comments about what each line does. And it will go down through the G code and it will put in comments about each line and what the command does and what it's generating. What is really special about that is now anybody can understand what the design intent was of that code and where the machine was supposed to be going. This can make troubleshooting the program easier in the long run because now you can look down through. It says, okay, I thought that the bit was going to go down 3 inches and then go off to the right for a 1/2 inch, and it didn't do that. I can look down through all the commented codes, and it might say move the bit 1/2 inch to the left instead of right, and now you know where the bug is. Anyway, I think it's really exciting times we're in. I think that there's so many cool things that we can do with this technology if we use it wisely, and it shouldn't really impact our jobs or anything like that. I know a lot of people are worried about AI taking over our jobs, but I just see this as a tool. It's another tool like my router bit, like my CAM software, like my iPad. It's just another tool. And once you learn how to use it, it can be a useful tool, I think. So if you haven't checked it out, you can go to chat.openai.com/chat. That will take you to the ChatGPT program that you can try out. Now, all of this is built on the OpenAI platform, which means anybody with the desire could create their own version of this and maybe one specifically just for G code. I await that and volunteer as a beta tester for somebody who wants to go that route. Anyway, check it out. It's called ChatGPT. That's George Paul Tom. ChatGPT. I don't know why it is we CNC enthusiasts seem to be slow at adopting new technology. And I don't know why that is, or other ways of reaching our potential customers. I've got the Facebook group that I mentioned earlier, the hashtag CNC Router Tips group. And when a person joins the group, they're asked to answer 3 questions, to join. One of them, the questions is, do they have a website? Because it's nice to go and check out what other people are doing and may have to offer. So I've got, in this past little bit, I've got about 3,000 people who've answered that question. But only about 27 of them even have a website. And I wonder how people are going about finding new clients or having the ability for clients to find them so that they can, market themselves. And I know it's not just the fact that only a portion of the membership actually is doing CNC business, but the fact is more than 60% of the people in the group actually have CNC businesses, yet they don't have a website. It's kind of strange. So I'm looking into this a little bit more, and I'm going to maybe come up with some solutions that will help people if they want to go in that direction. Because, if you don't have a website, your business doesn't exist outside of your immediate area. If your only method of contacting new clients is word of mouth, it's going to be a hard road ahead if you want to grow your business at all. Maybe you're comfortable doing what you're doing now, but wow, not even a website? That surprised me. Here I am telling you about artificial intelligence to write your G-code, and you haven't even taken care of the basics of putting up a website. I don't know. We'll probably discuss that some more in another episode. And if I can help you solve that, boy, I think I should. All right. So I wanted to keep this short so that I don't, A, have to edit it for very long, and B, your time is valuable. And I want to only give you, the meat and potatoes of something, or, something that you could go out and use today. And, ChatGPT is something you could go out and use today. It doesn't take any time to figure it out. And I think you'd have fun with that. I know I did. And I just want to thank you all for listening into this podcast episode, because I know you could do a lot of other things with your time. And I really appreciate the fact that you decided to spend time with me talking about CNC. I often mention many different types of software during the episodes, and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help, or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone, and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. I'm Bill Griggs. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I hope each and every one of you has a great day.